Welcome. Today we're going to be taking a look at Zoo Tycoon. This is a 1 to 4 player set collection economic animal game where you take the role of managers of a park trying to get the most victory points at the end of 7 years. Now let's take a look at the components. You have the scoreboard. On the scoreboard you have the conservation, education, and popularity tracks. Also your year summary, and at the bottom you have your year track. Animal exchange board. Animal exchange sheet. The red number are the demand and want to be leaving. The green number is the number offered but not enough to make an enclosure. And the green framed is a species offered that includes at least as many to make the enclosure. Animal meeples in 23 species. Start player marker. Discs for the year and season. Dice. Circular tiles. These are either contraception or prohibition. Enclosure tiles. There are 3 biomes. Bag for offspring discs. Offspring discs, male and female. For commercial buildings, you can only purchase these when you reach a popularity of 10 or higher, and they will reduce your running costs. Based on the tile type, for your food booths, they cost 5, and you would place the first one next to 2 adjacent enclosures of that type, the second next to a third enclosure, and once you have both, you can buy the zoo shop for 8, and it would reduce your running costs by 5, and it can go adjacent to any of those 3 enclosures. Focal points, the 4 types: popularity, education, conservation, and retreat. The conservation focal point would score 1 conservation point, and you can build equal to the conservation value. The education focal point would score entire education of the enclosure. The retreat focal point gives +1 to the species retreat. The popularity focal point score 1 popularity, and you can build equal to the group size. Building tiles. For the buildings, they cost 5 each, and you can only have 1 of each depiction in your zoo. Parks give you popularity based on adjacent buildings. Education booths gives you education based on adjacent types of tiles. Conservation centers give you conservation points based on enclosures adjacent that have conservation. Donor cards, event cards, worker meeples, player cubes, zoo boards. On your zoo board you track your money, quarantine spaces, places for tiles, and places for enclosures and buildings. Staff boards, you have your running costs. Animal cards. On the animal card you have the level, depiction, category. On the left side you have popularity, education, conservation, requirements, happiness, population, offspring litter, nurture, national park, enclosure number, cost, social, and tolerance. Overview cards. And finally your rule book. Now let's take a look at the setup. We're going to be setting this up for a 3-player game which takes 9 steps. Step 1, place the animal exchange and scoreboard in the center of the play area, opposite from each other. Step 2, place the animal exchange sheet under the animal exchange so that a sequence of characters is visible in every cutout. Step 3, get player components. Choose a color and get the zoo board, staff board, 22 animal cards, 3 overview cards, 3 workers, 1 cylinder, cubes, and you'll place the zoo board in the center of your player area with the staff board to the right. Step 4, get starting resources. You'll place a cube on 10 on your money track, get 6 enclosure tiles to place in the bottom left corner of your zoo board, place a cube on 0 on each cost track, and 3 workers on the squares. Step 5, place cubes on the scoreboard at 0 on the 3 tracks, and the cylinder on popularity below the 0 space. Step 6, create supply pools. Place gender cubes in the bag and then place them to the side along with dice, the giant panda card, co-species tiles, and animal meeples. Step 7, place prohibition tiles. You will place 8 on top the 8 squares of all zoo boards. The remaining enclosures, buildings, prohibition, contraception, wooden focal points are placed between the scoreboard and the animal exchange board. Step 8, shuffle and place event and donor cards and flip the top donor card. Step 9, place the year marker or round marker on 1 and the season on summer. Whoever has seen the largest animal that day gets to be the first player and gets the first player marker. Now let's take a look at the gameplay. A game consists of 7 years or rounds. Each year or round consists of 4 seasons, except for year 1 that starts in summer. You have spring, which is when you have offspring, summer, which is about departures and new arrivals, fall, which is about new enclosures, and winter, where the year is evaluated and ends. And then at the end of 7 years, the lower of either popularity or conservation is your victory points. Now let's look at a year in detail. Spring. This is skipped in year 1. This is carried out in 3 steps. Step 1, pass the start player counterclockwise. Step 2, reveal a new event card. Discard the old to the bottom of the deck. Breaking news is immediately resolved, and news lasts for at least one season. And then step 3, offspring. For each species a player has that has a male and female, and happiness for offspring, you would roll dice. You would roll a number indicated by the species, and you must get greater than or equal to the threshold number, and for each over, you would get a random offspring from the bag. Then you would move the popularity up by the species base value that was the highest. Keep in mind for nurture, you would take the number of dice and subtract the number that are laying on their side for offspring. Once you're done, you would then stand them up, and any new offspring, you would lay 1 on their side. Offspring in disc form, they don't need space, cost nothing, and can be given away, but -1 for popularity for each of those at the end of the game. Keep in mind that when you have a breeding, you would not only go up the buzz track, the base popularity value, but you also, if it is a level 1 or 2, go up the Worldwide Conservation Breeding Program track. During the spring, you have staff actions you could take using your workers. Breeding, for one animal species, you can re-roll an unsuccessful die. And then birth control. You can place a contraception tile on the animal card, and you will not have to roll for offspring for that animal the rest of the game. You can remove this at any time. Then we move to summer. Each player can perform 2 trades with the animal exchange. You can use workers for additional trades. This is carried out in 4 steps. Step 1, renew the animal exchange. You would move the sheet so that a new set is shown. Sets are never repeated in a game. Step 2, leaving. In turn order, players give away animals. You'll take the animals from quarantine or offspring discs and place them on the animal exchange. 1 species equals 1 trade, as long as demand still exists. For each of the species on the animal exchange, red is demand and green is the offer. Step 3, arrival. In turn order, you can take 1 or more from 1 species, and this follows a snake draft until all players pass or no trades are left. Offers are available until all are taken. When taken, you have to have the availability. If you take the given away animal, they are converted right away to that species. You have to fulfill the requirement. Level 1 has no requirement, but level 2 and 3, all species have to be light green happiness, or are already in the zoo or in quarantine. You also have to have space. You would add to an existing enclosure or new enclosure, evaluating the happiness immediately. Keep in mind that quarantine has no effect. You also want to use your cubes to track these traits. During the first round, you will start in the summer and arrival. You can ignore the requirements and start with a level 2 or 3 animal as well as a level 1. If you choose a level 3, you can only have 1 species and you would receive a free conservation center. After you go through the arrival phase, you move directly to the building phase. Keep in mind that if you build a level 3, you could have reintroductions. You can either use your offspring for reintroductions or add them to your enclosure. If you choose the reintroduction, you would place one of your player cubes on the cubes for that species. When it is full, you would slide a cube over, and then the players would split the number of conservation points. When choosing the arrival, keep in mind that you must have the availability and you must fulfill the requirements. For level 1 species, there are no requirements, and level 2 and 3, you have to have all of the species in your zoo with light green or dark green happiness, unless it's the first year. You would create an enclosure with the right number of spaces and the right number of retreats to then place your species. Then you would go up the running cost based on the number of tiles they are located on. Once all players are done, we would clear the animal exchange board and the conservation projects. Any unexpected demand supply are not removed. The summer staff actions are exchange, where you can perform 1 additional trade, unexpected supply, and unexpected demand. For the supply in the arrival phase, you can use an offer that's already been used. For unexpected demand in the leaving phase, you can empty one of your quarantine squares without a demand being present. Whenever you use one of these, you'll place one of your cubes on the animal exchange board. Keep in mind that you can only have 1 of each of the species in your zoo. And then we would move to autumn. This season is carried out in 4 steps. First, enclosure tile. Each player gets 3 free enclosure tiles. Also, the revealed donor awards another tile. Ties, both would get the tile. Players leading conservation track gets a tile, and any in that same segment would get a tile. If they're in 0 to 2 segment, none is awarded. All the tiles are placed in their corresponding field on the zoo board. Until the building phase, their biome is chosen freely. Step 2, replace the donor by drawing a new donor. Step 3, loans. You can take a prohibition tile for 4 money each. You can have up to 10 money. The only way to remove these prohibition tiles is purchasing enclosure tiles. The staff actions for fall, animal keeping, you can assign a worker to increase the experience of a species by 1. Maintenance, perform a construction action without paying 2. During the building phase, you can pay 2 or use the maintenance action to change a biome of an empty enclosure. move a building, or move enclosure tiles. And the entertainment staff action. This can be performed by only one worker per year, and you can gain either a popularity point, 2 education, or 1 conservation point. Step 4, building phase. Simultaneously or in turn order if desired, new enclosures or buildings are built and existing ones can be expanded. Once built, they can't be removed unless you take a construction action. Enclosure tiles purchased at this time cost 7 and remove 1 prohibition. You must place all enclosure tiles that you got or purchased. Enclosures grow if connected from the same biome. You can only have 1 enclosure per species. You would add the popularity for new species, 1 bonus for a mixed enclosure. The highest popularity base value of new main species that is added to your zoo is scored as buzz. The running cost track is adjusted, and you can be occupied by the quarantine or co-species. Keep in mind that popularity is permanent, but buzz is not. Enclosures must meet the requirement. Placed and social behavior and max per tile. Watch for co-species and main tolerant level. For focal points, they cost 2 each, and each tile can have 1 focal point. And building. These will be placed on the zoo board and can never have 2 equal buildings. The cost for these are 5. Commercial buildings can be placed with greater than or equal to 10 popularity. Food booths cost 5 and shops cost 8, but they bring in 3 or 5 respectively. You must build 2 food booths before you can build the shop, and the revenue is deducted from the running cost. On the animal card, you have the base popularity, education if you build that focal point anywhere in the enclosure, conservation points if you build that many in your enclosure, additional requirements, a picture of the animal, the name and level, the national park cooperation, the maximum number of animals per tile, the running cost per tile with animals of this type, social behavior, whether it is only 1 alpha male, multiple males are allowed without a female, or none, tolerance or co-species. You can either have a co-species or you don't. When you have a main species and a co-species, you get a star or popularity. The happiness. On the left is the experience. If you own a species of the same category, you would start on square 2, or the dark brown experience. The number of free spaces that are required, the number of retreats required, and the required group size. When you have certain group sizes, you can build the popularity focal point and then reproduction. Based on the level, you can roll die for reproduction. You can either roll a die per female, a die per pair, or 1 die. You'll gain a number of draws from the offspring bag, and then nurture. These will cause females to be laid on their side and would not produce the next round. Any that do produce with the nurture then would be laid down on their side, so they would not produce next round. And when you create a species, you would move your popularity up the base number, and then you would go up the buzz track by the highest base popularity of main species added to your zoo during the summer. Keep in mind that during the building phase, you can buy co-species at any time during this phase to place in your zoo. Now they must go on top of enclosure tiles. If they go into an enclosure with a main species, you would gain 1 extra popularity for creating a co-species enclosure. Some of them also have education or conservation, and if that focal point is built already, you would go up on those tracks. And you would also go up on your running cost based on their number. Keep in mind that when you do build your new enclosures, you want to place your cubes in each of the columns on the animal card to keep track of the happiness. Keep in mind that when you adjust your popularity, you will adjust your buzz cylinder as well. Then additional buzz can be obtained through events, offspring, or the base value of a newly introduced species. Once construction is done, we move to winter. Winter is carried out in 6 steps. Step 1, animal keeping. You would move the species experience up 1 for each species. Step 2, education scoring. The highest would get 1 conservation point, and any in the same segment would get 1 conservation point. No one in 0 to 2 would score. Step 3, taxes. You would reduce your money to 3 if you have any more. Step 4, revenue. The buzz cylinder location will generate revenue, +4 for the most and +2 for the second. You would then subtract your running cost. This is added to your money track. You cannot go below -10 or above 30. Step 5, reset buzz and staff. Buzz is removed, all workers are put back, the running cost is lowered accordingly. And then 6, new year. Keep in mind that negative money can never win the game. Then the years would continue until the end of year 7. At the end of year 7, we would go to the final scoring. Step 1, National Park Conservations. For those who have claimed National Park Cooperation, you would score their conservation now. If players achieve cooperation during the same round, they can place their cubes next to each other on the highest value. Step 2, Worldwide Conservation Breeding Program. The player with the highest score on the track would gain 8 conservation points, and the player with the second highest would receive 4. Step 3, animal welfare. Each player would determine their animal welfare. So if the level of happiness, or the lowest of your track, is dark green, you would gain 2. If it is light green, it's 0, and if it's yellow, -1. The player with the most, at least 1, receives 5 points, and the second highest would receive 3. And if a player is below -1, you would lose 2 points from their lower value track. Then all the players would spend all of their money. Keep in mind that you cannot add new animals during this step. And after you're finished, the game ends. You would subtract your offspring from your popularity, and the players would compare their popularity and their conservation. The lowest of the two tracks is their victory point total, and the player with the most victory points has the best zoo and wins Zoo Tycoon.